The LA Kings look for their third win in a row and some payback against the Chicago Blackhawks tonight. We'll tell you why it could be a noteworthy night for Gabe Vilardi and ask how many goals will he score this season. Plus, we've got some positive injury news to pass along regarding a couple of LA Kings prospects. And we'll read your emails and, in particular, talk about the Kings goaltending. All that and more coming up on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. If you missed it, we are continuing to climb towards our goal of 900 subscribers by the end of November. We are at 830-ish last time that I checked, so it looks like we're looking good to meet our goal and continue that streak of 100 or more subscribers every month, which is awesome. Thank you guys so much for the support. And again, if you are liking this channel, please like and subscribe. It really helps out. I am Eddie Garcia. I am your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for almost 30 years. For the past 20 plus years, I've been at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 16 years. And of course, a passionate LA Kings fan for 30 plus years. The LA Kings are back in action tonight. It is game number 16 of the NHL season as they host the Chicago Blackhawks. The Kings come in with an 8-6-1 record, good enough for 17 points. They're in third place right now in the Pacific Division. LA is coming in off a 1-0 win over the Wild on Tuesday. The Blackhawks check in with a 5-5-2 record. They sit fifth in the Central Division. They're coming off a 4-0 shutout loss in Winnipeg this past Saturday, so they've been sitting for a while and resting up. This is the second meeting of the season between the two teams, with the Hawks pulling out a 2-1 overtime win in Chicago exactly 1 week ago. In that game, the Kings were by far the better team, but did not show up on the scoreboard, unfortunately. So going into tonight's game, we've got some questions to ask, and hopefully we will answer those questions on tomorrow's show. But I think one of the big questions is one of the things we've seen so far this season. Can the Kings build off a good performance? They were great defensively as a team against Minnesota. Jonathan Quick obviously got the shutout, but it was really, with all due respect to Quickie, and he made some good saves, but I thought the Kings did a great job of really limiting the Wild's chances. They did not get many grade A scoring opportunities. Not a lot of, hardly any to speak of. Odd man rushes, no breakaways. It was a great team defensive effort. We see more of that going forward. I think the Kings are going to have a very successful season, but they, again, like we've talked about, they can't just do this here and there. It needs to be consistent. So we'll see if they can continue that against a Chicago Blackhawks team tonight, which is what they did the last time they met Chicago. So we'll see if they can keep it going. Always the question, who's going to be in net? And it looks like head coach Todd McClellan is going to go with Cal Peterson tonight. Now, Jonathan Quick is coming off the shutout, as I mentioned, and I was curious to see if McClellan wanted to continue to ride the hot hand, so to speak. But Jonathan Quick has played in 11 of the Kings' 15 games so far this season. 10 of them starts. The one relief appearance he had was in Pittsburgh, and he came in after one period. Quick is 3-0-1 in his last 14 appearances, 3-0-1 in his last 4 appearances. And he has allowed a total of 7 goals in those 4 games with the one shutout. Now, if it is Cal Peterson tonight, which we expect it will be, this will be his 6th start of the season. His first start since allowing 5 goals on 40 shots on November 1st in a loss in Dallas against the Stars. Hopefully Cal can see the same type of team defense around him tonight that we saw Tuesday night for Jonathan Quick in that 1-0 shutout of the Minnesota Wild. And we've got more coming up about Cal Peterson and the Kings goaltending situation when we answer some emails later on in the show. Another big question is, will Gabe Vilardi set a new career high for goals in a season tonight? We mentioned this on Wednesday's show, but Gabe Vilardi has tied his career high in goals in a season. He did it last game, scoring the game winner against the Wild. He had 10 goals in 54 games back in the 2020-21 season. And so far this season, he has 10 goals in 15 games. He's on pace for 54 goals this season. I don't think he's going to make that, But I'll be disappointed, honestly, if he doesn't hit the 30 goal mark at this point. And we saw Adrian Kempe take a pretty big jump last year, going from 14 goals to 35 goals, setting a new career high. I even think Vilardi might have an outside shot at 40 goals this season if he stays healthy, if he continues to play on the top line, and if he continues to play on the number one power play unit. I think it's possible. And to make a jump like that is pretty crazy. Like I said, I really think 30 goals is a real possibility for him. 40 might be asking a little bit too much because at some point, there's going to be a slump for him. I think I would be surprised if he can keep this pace up. Like I said, 54 goals would put him in elite status, but we'll see. As I've said, and I hope I'm not gushing too much over Gabe, but it's great to see. It's fun to see. I'm enjoying the confidence, enjoying him seeing. I think he's probably known all along this is the player I can be. And now we're seeing it all kind of fall into place, and it's awesome. And hopefully it keeps going, and hopefully he can score a goal tonight and get a new career high for him for goals in a season. And we're not even midway through November at this point, so that's pretty amazing. Will the Kings power play be better? It's hard to imagine that it could be worse after what we saw Tuesday against the Wild, where they went 0 for 4 with the man advantage. And it felt worse than that because they looked awful, getting just a couple of shots and no quality scoring chances on a 5-minute major. So again, Kings have much work to do on that power play to get it going the way it needs to be for this team to really do something significant this season and hopefully in the postseason. And the final question I have going into tonight's game, will we see Brandt Clark? The rookie defenseman has been in on 9 NHL games so far this season. Still hasn't played in that 10th game yet. That's the magic number for his entry-level contract to kick in. He has not played since November 1st. He's missed the last 3 games. And we've talked about it. Is this because the next game is the 10th game and the Kings are trying to stretch out his stay by having him just practice and be around the team for as long as possible? Or is he recovering from something? We know that he took a big hit against Jamie Benn in his last game against the Stars, and there was some sort of pretty significant dental work that had to be done. So is it a combination of those things? Is it one or the other? Is it neither? Is it just because the Kings are playing pretty well right now? They just want to keep the same lineup going? Don't know, but we'll be keeping an eye out to see if Brandt Clark finally gets on the ice tonight. We're going to answer all those questions when we recap the Kings Blackhawks game on Friday's show. We have some positive injury news to pass along for the Kings and some bad injury news for one of the Kings' rivals. We'll tell you more about that in a second. But first, we need to tell you about BetOnline.net. It is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every pro and college league out there, from football to basketball to soccer. World Cup is coming soon. Also, esports, they've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, which you probably do because you're listening to this, you can find those at BetOnline as well. BetOnline is always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to betonline.net today or use your mobile device to learn more. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. So we have some injury news to pass along, and the LA Kings officially activated forward Alex Turcotte and loaned him to Ontario in the AHL. Now, Turcotte has not played in a game since sustaining a second concussion of the season back on May the 11th in a playoff game for the Ontario Reign. He missed the Kings development camp, rookie camp, training camp, and the preseason as he was slowly recovering, and the Kings were obviously being very careful with his situation. The Reign are in action tonight in San Jose. No word if the former first-round pick, 5th overall in 2019, is going to play in that game or not. But once he gets back on the ice, obviously we'll let you know how it goes. And obviously everybody keeping their fingers crossed for all the best for Alex Turcotte. It has not, I'm sure, been an easy road back for him. I'm sure there's been a lot of disappointments. I'm sure there's been a lot of wondering, if he's ever going to get to play again. And, there is a bigger picture. I know this is a hockey podcast. We're talking about the Kings and their players and their prospects, but just from a life standpoint, concussions can be a very tricky thing. And we hope for all the best for Alex Turcotte. And obviously he wants to continue his hockey career. We want to see him play well and live up to all the promise that he had when the Kings drafted him so highly a few years ago. So this is the first step back for Alex Turcotte. Fingers crossed and wishing him all the best. The Kings have a big road trip coming up next week and a big game next Wednesday against the Edmonton Oilers. It's their first matchup since the last meeting, which was in the playoffs, of course, the Game 7 By the way, in previewing that game next week, we're going to have a crossover episode with Locked On Oilers host Brett Holden. Hopefully that'll go well and you'll enjoy that. It's something we'll do a little bit more going forward when we have some kind of bigger marquee matchups during the season. But news for the Edmonton Oilers, which will kind of affect the Kings as far as that matchup. But one of their top six forwards, Evander Kane, who I'm sure you all know well from his days in San Jose as well, he's going to be out 3 to 4 months. So the Kings obviously will not be seeing him anytime soon. A very scary injury for him the other day on Tuesday. He took a skate blade to the wrist. He was laying on the ice, and one of the Tampa Bay players, I think it was Patrick Maroon, accidentally went over his wrist with his skate. And I'm sure you know skate blades can be extremely sharp, and it cut his wrist pretty severely. Had to be taken to the hospital and get that taken care of. But yeah, the Oilers will be without Evander Kane for 4 to 6 months. Edmonton right now, fourth place in the Pacific with 16 points. The Kings are in third place with 17 points. So those two teams obviously kind of battling for position at this point in the Pacific Division. And we know about the history last year with the playoff matchup. So there's some news on one of the Kings rivals and not good news for them. And frankly, maybe some good news for the Kings, unfortunately. We've got some emails to read, including comments about the Kings goalie situation. And we'll get to that in just a second. But I want to invite you to check out Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, it is time to check the Locked On Kings email inbox, and thank you guys for the emails this week. This first one comes from James Healy. And I don't know where James is from. Maybe he mentioned it before and I forgot. But anyway, he wanted to touch on a possible trade involving Cal Peterson. And here's a part of the email that James sent. He said, "I'll tell you who would be awesome. Poor Elvis from Columbus. I love that dude. Unlike Cal, he has proven himself, but with the thing with his buddy dying in front of him, he has never been the same. He needs a change, and being the guy with quick would be awesome. A straight trade of Cal for Elvis. Luckily, Elvis is doing horrible now, like Cal, and so it could happen. But at least with Elvis, we know he is a total badass and just needs a new mindset. How many chances should he have?" You're talking about Cal Peterson. He's already had too many. If he sucks tonight, then bring up Phoenix, and that's that. And trade Cal. It just ain't going to happen. And by the way, I do feel bad for him. Of all the guys who have ever been Quick's backups, he is the one who they were looking to fill his shoes. Ain't no one filling his shoes except possibly another stud. So again, that was from James. And he's talking, if you don't know about Elvis Merzlikins, he is a goaltender for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And James feels like that could be a straight up swap for Cal Peterson. And by the way, he talked about his buddy dying. You may have heard, I think it was maybe 2 years ago now, there was a July 4th fireworks accident where the backup goalie for Columbus took one of those high-end fireworks in the chest when it fell over, and he ended up dying from that. And so that's what James was referring to with that tragic situation. So I actually think James is onto something here. Not necessarily Elvis Merzlikins, although I'll kind of go into that in a second. But if the Kings were to trade Cal Peterson, and I don't think they're there at this point, but just speculating, because that's what we do as sports fans, it would need to be something like an Elvis Merzlikins, a guy who also could maybe benefit from a change of scenery, is about the same age, has put up kind of similar numbers, and it could be just a straight up swap. However, the big thing is that the contracts would have to align as well. So just real quick, let's take his Elvis Merzlikins theory into it and look at the numbers. Both Elvis Merzlikins and Cal Peterson are 28 years old. So that matches up. Elvis Merzlikins has played in 210 NHL games. He has a record of 105, 97, and 7, 2.63 goals against average, 920 save percentage. Cal is played in 96 NHL games, 42 and 40 the record, 2.90 goals against average, and a 906 save percentage. So Elvis has got the advantage as the numbers, but it's not overwhelming, but he does have the advantage. Of course, he's got more games played because he's been a number one goalie in Columbus. As far as this season, Elvis Merzlikins is 7 starts. He's 2-5, 4.82 goals against average, 862 save percentage, and Columbus is one of the worst teams in the NHL this season. Cal Peterson has 5 starts. He's 3-2, 4.30 goals against average, 868 save percentage. So Cal has the advantage in numbers this year, but then again, he's playing behind a much better team than Elvis Merzlikins is. So here's the rub with this potential trade. Elvis Merzlikins has a no trade clause, first of all. That has to be taken into account. Now, I would imagine if he were to be traded to a team like LA, he would welcome that because, again, he'd be playing in front of a much better team or behind a much better team. And, LA, Columbus, I mean, who knows? Maybe Johnny Gaudreau likes Columbus. But anyway, the trade, the hiccup in the trade, though, is the contract. Like I said, Elvis Merzlikins, no trade clause. He's under contract for 4 more years at $5.4 million per season. Cal Peterson is under contract for 2 more years at $5 million per season. I don't think you want to trade for a goaltender who has had a similar career to Cal Peterson, and he's making more money, and he's going to be under contract for more years. Now, Elvis Merzlikins, maybe he does have better numbers playing with a better team. That does seem to make sense. But is he that much better that you're willing to take on more years and more money? And the answer is no. The Kings would never do that, nor should they, because of the contract. But back to James's point, if there is a possibility of trading Cal Peterson, again, it would have to be something somewhat similar to this, but the numbers would have to match up with the contract. They're not going to bring in somebody again who hasn't proven himself, who's making more money and has longer term. It's going to have to be the opposite, maybe, or at least similar, something along the same line. Somebody that's under contract for a couple more years, that's making maybe around $5 million and is somebody who hasn't really found his place on a certain team, and maybe you're trading a guy who needs a fresh place for a guy who needs a fresh place. That's maybe the possibility we could see with a Cal Peterson trade. That having been said, I don't think the Kings are thinking about that anytime soon. But it's something to think about going forward if Cal Peterson continues to struggle, what the Kings are going to do in net, not only for this season, but beyond this season as well. Our next email comes from Sarah in New Mexico. And she also wants to talk about the Kings goaltending situation. She says, how are the Kings going to handle Jonathan Quick's workload? I love Quickie, but I'm concerned with how much he's going to have to play with Cal Peterson struggling. We need a strong Quick for the playoffs, but I'm afraid he will be worn down if Peterson can't get his game going. What do you think the plan should be going forward? I mean, we've talked about it a lot, and we all know it's no secret that Cal Peterson has to be better because he has to help carry the load. Jonathan Quick is on pace to start 60 games this season. That's way too much. He has started 10 of 15 so far, which I mentioned earlier. The last time Jonathan Quick started 60 or more games was in the 2017-18 season when he started 46 games. And, frankly, as well as Jonathan Quick has played so far, and I think he's played better than his numbers, and I think he is absolutely trending in the right direction after a little bit of a slow start. I just don't think that's realistic for him to start 60 games. Again, we're looking bigger picture here as well. We're looking for him to be strong and on his game when the games matter most, late in the year and hopefully in the playoffs. And again, Cal has to step up more. But the situation, though, with the Kings right now, as I'm sure you well understand, is that the Kings are in a third spot in the standings. They're kind of in that third place wild card spot where I think they're going to be most of the year. Hopefully I'm wrong about that. Hopefully it's better than that. So points are going to be at a premium, and you want to get as many points as possible. And if you've got a goaltender who is older, but he's playing well of late, which Quick is of late, there's a tendency to want to get him out there as much as possible. But at some point, Todd McClellan and Bill Ranford, the goalie coach, understand we've got to get Cal Peterson more involved and carry some of the load, but he's got to find his game first. So that hasn't happened at this point. Hopefully it will soon. If and when that does happen, then we'll see Cal be able to take on a little bit more of the load, but that's just not where we are at this point. So the plan is, like I said, to cut back on quick starts at some point, but right now they can't do it because of the way Jonathan Quick is playing of late and because of the way Cal Peterson has played so far in the season. But at some point that needs to happen if we're going to have a strong and healthy Jonathan Quick going forward. Our next email comes from Dawn, who says, love the podcast. Do you have any info on our KHL prospect, Kirill Krisanov? Is he an improving player? Is he getting a lot of ice time with the big club SKA? Also, are there any problems with the KHL regarding the Russian-Ukraine war that could affect his availability to the Kings? Also, is Martin Chromiak close to being able to play? Well, first off, Kirill Krisanov, who was the Kings pick in the third round in 2021, has not played a KHL game this season. He is playing in the two lower divisions in the KHL, like the NHL has the AHL. The KHL has a couple of different lower leagues, the VHL and the MHL, and I don't know what those stand for. It's the Vladimir Hockey League. I don't know. He has played in 20 games in the VHL with 12 points, 2 goals, and 10 assists. He's played in 4 games in the MHL, which is the slightly higher version, kind of our AHL. He's got 2 goals and 3 assists in 4 games. So that's his numbers so far on the season. Obviously, the issues with Russia and the war with Ukraine make this whole situation very fluid. It appears that Kirsanov is still a ways away from being any kind of NHL caliber type player. And what happens between now and then over the next couple of years is completely unknown. So could it affect his status coming to the U.S. to play pro hockey? Absolutely, it could. There's a goaltending prospect for the Philadelphia Flyers who was ready to play at the NHL level with Philadelphia this year, and Russia basically drafted him into the Army and kept him from coming over. So that's a thing. As for Martin Chromiak, he had an appendectomy right before the AHL season was to start. According to this thing called the internet, the typical recovery time for an appendectomy is 2 to 4 weeks. Of course, that's typical for a normal person, not necessarily a professional athlete who has to put his body through more things. Of course, the normal person also isn't in elite physical condition, you would think, than a professional athlete. So bottom line is it's been about 4 weeks. So he should be ready to return to game action soon, I would think. Officially, I have not heard anything, but we talked about Alex Turcotte coming back. It looks like Martin Chromiak should make his AHL debut coming up soon as well. So definitely going to look to have somebody from the Ontario Reign come on the show here soon to get an update on the Reign, to do an interview with that. So hopefully you'll be looking forward to that, and we'll get an update on both those guys. Our final email is from Steven Ventura. He says, I totally agree with you about the Department of Player Safety. If there is no injury, they go way light on punishment. A friend of mine sent me a text saying he thought Tkachuk would get 5 to 7 games. I said 0 to 3. If Quick was injured, it may have been 5 to 7, maybe, but intention is not really taken into account. Sadly, a guy can accidentally miss a shoulder-to-shoulder hit, catch someone in the jaw, and get a big suspension, while a guy who swings a stick at someone's head and misses may not even get a 2-minute minor. I exaggerate, but it could happen. Maybe the players' union need to stand up for their players and pressure the Department of Player Safety to protect the players. But of course, that means the players who commit the fouls, who they also represent, get longer suspensions and lose more money. So probably not going to happen. That's a great point, Steve. The Players Association is in an interesting dilemma when it comes to wanting more punishment for players, because they represent all the players, the guys who commit the acts and the guys who are at the receiving end of the illegal play. But you would think that overall, the safety of the players should trump the amount of money that they're making. Now, I mean, we know how money influences everything, of course, but it is an interesting dilemma when you think about the players' union and where they kind of need to come down on this type of thing. But yeah, the Department of Player Safety has definitely dropped the ball. I would think they need some new leadership in there. George Peros probably needs to go, but whoever his bosses are, Gary Bettman and Bill Daly and the like, apparently think he's doing a good job. But it is very unfortunate. And you mentioned there was an incident earlier this year where Yevgeny Kuznetsov of the Washington Capitals literally swung his stick intentionally and hit a player from the Vancouver Canucks in the face with his stick, and he got a 1-game suspension. So, yeah. Hey, thank you guys so much for the emails. It's always fun to get your feedback and answer some questions. If you want to send an email on a future show to be read and talked about, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, lockedoneddie@gmail.com. We are on Twitter @LockedOnLAKings and also on Instagram @LockedOnLAKings. And I did upload some new videos and pictures from the game that I was at as a fan on Tuesday against the Minnesota Wild, if you want to check that out. Tonight, it is the LA Kings against the Chicago Blackhawks. Face-off set for 7:30 at Crypto.com Arena. The game will not be televised locally. It will be broadcast on ESPN Plus and on Hulu. Of course, you can always listen on the LA Kings iHeart Audio Network. On Friday's show, we will have a full recap of tonight's game against the Blackhawks and hopefully break down the Kings' third win in a row. Hey, thank you so much for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and beyond the scene, behind the scene, with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. That is Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I am Eddie Garcia. Thank you so much for listening and watching to Locked On LA Kings. Go Kings, go.